Hello, my name is James Dearsey. I'm the Marketing Director from Buy Association. I thought we'd just have a quick update today with regard to the UK property market. It's getting quite an interesting time at the moment. We are now 3 months to go before the general election. So I thought it was about time we had Kate Faulkner, our property expert in the UK, on board to discuss what's going on. Kate, I think primarily we've got two reports that you've just recently come out with. So let's sort of kick off with that, I think, if you don't mind. PRS, or the Property Private Rental...
Private rental sector.
I knew I'd mark that. What am I talking
or
about?
rental sector, you could have that.
I could have that as well. What's going on? Tell us about that, because it's a fascinating report. Go for it.
Well, it is. I mean, like last year, all I kept hearing was all landlords are horrible, all letting agents fleece you blind and don't do anything, and you've got to make this massive change, and tenants need lots of protection and nobody looks after them. And we were fired. There was huge numbers of stats and figures about how life was terrible for tenants, particularly that rents were spiraling out of control. And being somebody that monitors this stuff and has done for 15 years, I was like, I'm not actually sure this is correct. And what's quite good is there is a cross-party support that says the private rental sector is growing, it has families in it now, and it needs to mature. And that, I think, is 100% correct. But the problem is that the way that a lot of the housing organisations or tenant organisations want it to mature is almost to whack landlords and letting agents on the head. So they want to drop tenant fees for letting agents. Well, that's 10 or 20% of their turnover. And most of them don't charge anything like what people are saying. So most in London, you'll pay about 250 quid. Outside of that, you'll pay about £170 or less. Whereas the impression is you pay thousands of pounds, and you just don't. So what I wanted to do was to kind of draw together all the numbers. So let's not just look at tenant arrears, let's look at landlord arrears, because they're pretty serious. Tenants lose their home if the landlord loses their property. So that's what we did. We've kind of looked at it, called it 360. One of the charts in there that I'm sort of quite pleased with and we want to expand on is we looked at if you are a landlord and you bought a £150,000 home and you put down 50% loan to value, which actually in London you'd have to just to break even, just to have cash flow a little bit positive. Then we looked at what it would cost tenant rent. Then we looked at what it would cost somebody to buy on a 95% mortgage. And we found with the landlord, if you got an average yield of 5.5%, so you got a £100,000 home, you got £5,500 rent coming in. If rates go back, mortgage rates go back to the 5% they have been long term, you let it legally, do all the right things, you'll lose 500 quid income a year. And nobody's they want affordable housing, and they want to put people in who would be in social housing, the private rental sector. And actually, you can't afford it. It's nuts. That's not what the PRS was there for. It wasn't there to substitute people who are socially vulnerable and low paid.
Yeah, I mean, I think just coming back to one of the first things that you raised in that, which I think is a very important distinction for anybody who wants to read the report, and actually just incidentally, if you are watching this as a recording, I think it's down on this side here, there's a little button there which says be part of the conversation. And if you just click that, don't worry, you're not going to join us, but what you will do is this video will enlarge in your screen, and the reports that Kate and I are talking about, or will be talking about, are actually there. So you can get access to that. But one of the most important things I think you just said there, Kate, was the fact that you mentioned it was called a 360 report. And basically, my understanding of this, having looked at it, is that you're looking at this perspective from not just one side, which I think
that's it.
Anything in the news that we've seen over the last 1 year, 2 year, 5 years is a very biased perspective, i.e. we must protect the tenants because the tenants are the important thing, or all the letting agents are doing something really bad, or all these private landlords are terrible. And it's all come from a very biased political perspective. And I think what can be said from your report is that you've looked at it from everybody's perspective in one area.
Yes.
And is it fair to say, because I don't know, I think this private rental sector, personally, it's sort of on a teetering on a knife edge, which is if we don't look after each bit and try to improve it, looking at the 360 perspective, it's not going to do particularly well. because suddenly the private landlords are getting shot down. No one's going to rent from them. It's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, which is it's only going to end up in a worse state than what it is now. So we've got to just look at what we've got, help it, amend it, and improve it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But the problem the government have got, and we have as a sector, is that 78% of landlords own only one property. So you've got 1.6 million landlords, they reckon now. And you're talking then about having to communicate with over 1 million people. We don't know where they are, we don't know who they are, and we don't know where their rented property is. And there's Alan Ward, who's chair of the RLA, Resident Landlord Association. He came up with what I think is the most geniusly simple idea. Don't worry so much about landlord licensing, but why don't you just get tenants, when they're filling in the council tax form, and people to tick whether they're renting or not. And suddenly, really cheaply, you've suddenly got a whole, the local authorities know where all the rented properties are. And you're not relying on a landlord to join a licensed group, if you like, or pay for a license, who, if they're a rogue, they're not going to do it anyway. So you're never going to find out who they are. And that's what we have in this sector, is loads and loads of rules, which all the good guys abide by. So if you let legally and if you let through a good agent, yes, it'll cost you a bit more, but they're abiding by all the rules. And the letting agents that don't and the landlords that don't are almost being rewarded because they don't have to, their costs aren't so high. So they can lower their bills and they can attract people, funnily enough, who are socially vulnerable and are low paid, and then they end up in a terrible market because nobody's looking after them.
Well, I tell you what, let's focus on that a little bit, because I think one of the key takeaways from the report that you've mentioned is the fact that, the private rental sector is not necessarily there to support the lower end of society in the sense of the low paid and perhaps the unemployed and the benefit system. It's just not quite there. I don't know if you've got anything to sort of comment from your findings on that, which is quite...
Well, they reckon there's about 25% of people in the private rental sector who are on benefits. So they have some form of benefits. And then what's happening in the kind of conversation is that landlords are then being accused of taking benefits and taking money from people. So if you're like, well, that's no different to somebody spending money at Sainsbury's, their benefit money at Sainsbury's. And what they're saying is, well, because landlords are all evil, they must be taxed more. So in my case, we rent a property to a girl who's a single mum, and we do it through Wokingham Borough Council. We don't max out on the rent because we're not actually worried about that, and we wanted to give a nice home to somebody for the next kind of 5 years. And what they're suggesting is that I have to pay more tax for doing that, which is crazy, because I'd just sell or I'd let them go, and then I'd move in a professional and I'd earn more money. And that's where we've got a lot of people commenting and wanting policies who don't understand the market, or if they do, it's only London that they know. Because actually outside of London, the rental market works pretty well.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cost effective as well. So and to give an example of that, in London, house prices are normally 3 times everywhere else, but rents are only double. So there's a real difference, real difference. Rents do not rise at anywhere like the same level as house prices. So, and that's an issue for landlords, because a lot of landlords want to invest in property for pension. We've got that whole big argument going on, or that sort of phase going on. And I'm like, well, buy-to-let's not really an income-generating investment at all. And rent, you can't compare rent to having a pension.
No, you can't. And it's very interesting, your fact there a little bit earlier on. You said 78% own only one property.
Yeah, and most people don't realise that. So they're having a go at these nasty landlords. Well, that's probably somebody who's working abroad who's letting out the home. Or it's somebody whose mum's really poorly, they're in hospital, and they've let their home out.
Yeah. Or I think as in a lot of
cases over the last... care fees.
We've also seen a lot in the last few years when obviously the trade-up happens, and you've got an awful lot of young professionals perhaps who have bought a home and then they move into the marital home and they have a property left over. That's what happened with us. We became the classic term of incidental landlords, although actually it was a bit more deliberate in our case. But the point is, you have an awful lot with one property. And it's funny, isn't it? I remember writing an article probably even 9 or 10 years ago now, where I was talking about this whole private rental sector and saying that there is only one outcome for this, which is rental prices are going to continue to drive down as home ownership decreases. Because you're going to get an awful lot of more institutionalized landlords where, quite frankly, they're not looking at it as a private rental sector. They're looking at it as an asset.
Yes.
And ultimately, what will happen is if they're looking at it as an asset, it will mean that they don't really care about it. And what we're going to have is we're going to have an awful lot of more rental-based properties held by perhaps larger landlords. And quite frankly, that is not going to do the private rental sector any good.
I don't know that I agree with that actually. No, so every problem we have in the housing sector goes back to the fact that we haven't built enough homes to put a roof over people's heads at a price that they can afford. That's it. So you look at all the other countries, and everybody talks about Germany and how great the rental market is there. Well, even in America, something like 20% of their housing stock plus, and it goes up to 50% in Europe, is owned by institutional landlords. And actually, you've got a company, for example, like Patrizia, which is coming into the UK, and they are an awesome business. And you should kind of see the work that they're doing over in Germany, and they're bringing that here. So to have a company like that would be fantastic, because you get long-term landlords. Not like me and my husband, if we split up, if one of us got sick, we'd sell the property. Whereas that won't happen with these guys. They also build properties for rent, and the structure of a property to be built for rent is very different to ones that we build here. So, for example, you don't put washing machines in and dryers into a rental property for long term. You put them in a communal area, gets everybody chatting, stops damp, which is one of the biggest problems in the rental sector. So we actually desperately need those guys. We have 1% of our stock is institutional investors. 1%. And the main reason we're so low is because of Rachman back in the 60s, who gave it a bad name, so everybody sold up. And then secondly, because of the rent controls, it wasn't worth them doing. Of course, Labour are talking about rent controls. We've spent years trying to court institutional investors. We've just got them over here, and that could completely frighten them off.
That's a great ringtone.
Oops.
But I tell you what,
it is quite a cool song actually.
I love it.
I always think happy song, happy talking when you're on the phone.
We could just have a Friday dance. But I tell you what, there's a point you raised in there, which I think it is becoming a political hot potato. Obviously, we are, as I mentioned at the start, 3 months away from general election. We know housing is almost becoming a pivotal point in this election. I mean, only in the news, just as I was watching last night, they were saying that we are under a severe shortage. We need something like 250,000 new homes built over the next 30 years to allow us to get to where the population is growing to. Last year, we had 111,000 built. Currently, I think since it was about 2007, we are now over 500,000 homes short of target.
I think it would be more than that.
They said 530 or.
I reckon it will be well about. I reckon we're about a million short. I mean, one of the things, we've got 1.6 million people on the council waiting list.
Yeah.
Imagine that there was 1.6 million people out there that needed an operation, and were told they couldn't have one, or they had to bid for the next one under their circumstances. Or imagine the idea of putting 1.6 million kids, funding them into private schools because we haven't got enough places in the public sector. This would be unacceptable. Whereas suddenly, what MP has got a plan to reduce that council waiting list? None of them. And that list either doesn't work, so they should be doing something else, or they need to make it work. It's daft.
I'm trying to work out at the moment what is more difficult, to put in a little tick list at the council level to allow us to realise sort of who is in rental accommodation, or the fundamental evolution of our entire housing sector. I'm just sort of wondering what's easier at the moment.
Well, at the end of the day, it's not complicated. We've got an amount of land. We know what the need is, and we've just got to work out how best to fill it. It's not money. A lot of people saying, "Oh, it's the finance." It's nothing to do with money. There's plenty of money. There's a lot of money wants to come into the country, but we don't have enough leadership at a local authority level. And I think the MPs don't have enough ambition or belief that it can be done. They're frightened of setting too ambitious targets because they're then frightened they're going to be shot down.
I think I would have to agree. I mean, in the amount of conversations that I've had with a lot of the UK developers out there, they're saying their biggest issue, they have a need and they have a want to build.
Yeah.
They fundamentally want to build.
Yeah.
Their issue is a pure planning issue.
Yeah.
One of the other political hot potatoes out there is brownfield sites. Obviously, there's a lot of talk, because I think, as in one of your other reports, which again is in this the showcase out, if people are watching and they will click on that button, you'll see the regional property price update from Kate. You know, one of your points is that what we've got to remember from this political hot potato of the general election is it's not every single place in the entire country. There's lots of little tiny bits. So one of the big issues, say, for example, in the London and the South East, is this whole issue of brownfield sites. Should we open these up for planning? And these developers are screaming for land, saying we should be able to build there, we can build there, and fundamentally, you want to build 250,000 homes, we can build it, but there needs to be a change at the top level. So,
yeah, it's a belief thing really, and what it needs is where we've got good leadership at a local level, things are going on. But you talk about the local council, so each local authority, and I'm amazed the media haven't picked up on this, has to produce a local plan, which identifies what the need is, and then the sites that should be able to fill that need. Only half the councils have done it. And if you haven't got a local plan, say for example in your area, then developers have much more power, can complain to the kind of top brass, the national guys, and you're less likely to have any control over what's built in your area. How is it that half the councils are being allowed to get away with not having a plan to put a roof over everybody's heads? I think that's disgusting. I think they should, it just shouldn't be allowed.
Do you think there's an element of a waiting game there? Of them saying, look, general elections looming, maybe some shifts here, do we need to bother? Could that be part of it? I don't understand.
I don't know the answer to that, and it's certainly something we're going to be looking into, because I think it's pretty serious. Basically, imagine you and I just deciding that we're only going to do half our targets this year. Do you know what I mean? It's just like you can never run businesses like that. And this is people's lives. It's about putting a roof over people's heads, and that is a local authority's duty to do that. And if half of them don't get their backsides moving to work out how it's going to be done, not only are they hurting the people who need a roof over their head, but they're also hurting the people that live in the place in the first place, because they're not giving them a chance to input on where they would like to see new housing and what new housing they want. And that's the issue, is I think it's a real sort of failure in kind of duty by not producing it. As I say, where you get really good leadership, and in areas like Nottingham, for example, I don't think we've got a housing crisis at all. 2-bed property, £60,000. You can even pick ones up for 40 grand. They're not in the best of areas, but they're no different to areas I first bought in. Rents for £300, £400, £500. 3-bed house, 500 quid. That's not bad. But
no, do you know what? It is one of the most difficult things, and I am conscious of the time that we're on, because the problem is, Kate, you and I could probably talk about this sort of stuff forever and ever and ever and ever. And it's it's lovely. It's a passion in there, and there's a lot of knowledge, and I'm sure if we could become the housing minister in the next Tory Labour,
I'd kick some ass if that happened.
I'd be frightened. I wouldn't want to be the shadow housing minister if you were in there. But no, the problem is we could talk about it forever, and I think let's not go into there. But look, let's just sort of summarise all this up, because I think there's another point which you mentioned in there, which I think is fundamentally important, which is this build-to-rent idea. We're not necessarily going to have time in this, but I think I urge anybody out there to have a look at that as a sector, which could be very, very
definitely. Yeah, and also you can add into that, because we're just starting to do some work on a custom build. Have you heard of that one? Now, custom build is fascinating. So at the moment, if you are a developer, you have to discuss with the council something called a Section 106 agreement. And typically what that means is that it's a way for their local authority to negotiate some free social housing or some cheap social housing, and some road systems that will enhance the area, stuff like that. But what they've put in now is, bearing in mind something like 5 million people watch Grand Designs, but we haven't got one more self-builder in the last 15 years as a result of that programme, because I think it scares people. this is where, and I think in a few weeks' time, there's going to be in Cherwell, so that's Oxfordshire way, 1,900 plots have been put aside for what we call custom build. So you and I could pop along, look at various different designs. The plots are already sorted, and then we can just pay for the house that we choose to be built on that plot.
Mm.
Now that puts what I love about it is it puts it gives me or a majority of people the opportunity to build our own home. And local authorities have to now identify that need. And I think if we can get the institutional investors in, and the other reason we have a poor stock levels versus other countries, a lack of self-building, a lack of people taking responsibility and doing it themselves. And I think that's an amazing way that we can start closing the gaps. So there's some good things coming up.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's one of these things. So I'm not even talking in sense there because I'm just thinking in my head. One of the most important things I
can see you thinking, actually. I think we can all see you thinking. It's all like a little look into the cogs.
It is but no, I mean, for me, there's always been three areas. Fundamentally, looking at the next sort of 1 to 5 years, and one of them is always this. Yeah, build to rent. It makes sense if it can.
It does.
Translate over here. I think that's the key thing. We know it works elsewhere. Will it work here? Number two, we know the retirement sector is massive. Some of those retirement house builders, or whatever you choose to term them, because that's one of the biggest challenges, that is only ever going to be a growing area at the moment. And this custom build, I'm familiar with custom build. I've dealt with it in the overseas property market for years and years and years and years and years.
Right, interesting.
The problem is here in the UK, maybe we're just a little bit afraid. There is an appetite for it. We've got to look at these sectors and say, well, where's the appetite and where's the need? There's a need in build to rent. There's a need in the retirement sector because we've got an aging population and we've got a younger population who cannot necessarily get on the first-time buyer market. So there's a need there. But what you've just mentioned there, Kate, about the whole custom build side, there is an appetite. You've got to look at the whole Kevin MacLeod, the chap from Newcastle, who I can never remember.
George,
good old George.
George and his amazing spaces, which is a cracking program actually.
What's George's name?
Clark,
that's it. George Clark. Love listening to him.
He's very, very, very tall.
Is he?
Very tall. Yes, I felt like a 5-year-old standing next to him. I really did. And I told him off as well. He'd been a bit naughty in his comments about landlords. And I didn't hold back.
Well, that's a nice link. Let me then link that to closing off this, which is saying, look, the PRS report is very worthwhile reading. So if you guys want to have a little look at it, again, please click on that, go to the conversation, and you'll open up Kate's report there as well. It's fascinating. A 360-degree review, which, quite frankly, isn't done, and it should be read and acknowledged and understood, because, quite frankly, what we read in the news and what we listen to a lot of the time is very sensationalist and very one-sided. And, quite frankly, when it comes to the housing situation that we are in this country, which, let's be quite frank, we know there is a deficit in housing and we need to understand how to get out of it, there is an understanding for a complete overview, not just a one-sided perspective.
Absolutely.
I think that's where Kate comes in. So look, thanks, Kate. Thanks for all your time. I really appreciate that, and good luck. I think you're speaking today, aren't you, at an event?
Oh no, I just get to sit and listen to others. So we're finding more about private rental sector indices, so I can update you on that next time. Very exciting.
I bet that must be nice, isn't it? Sitting in the audience. That's lovely.
Yeah, I know. It's great. It's like a day off.
Not even talking. How cool is that? All right.
I think I'll probably have a thing to say or two.
Just remember, if you're the housing minister, I don't want to be the shadow. And on that point, I'm going to sign off and stop the broadcast on this one. So thanks everyone for watching, and for those of you who want to look at sort of things like this coming forward, we get Kate. Kate writes a monthly article for us here at Buyer Association, whose total aim is fundamentally to bring you the latest resources and an unbiased perspective on what's going on in the housing market, whether it be in the UK or overseas. We need a greater understanding for what's out there, and really, that's what we're here to do. So once again, it's James here from Buyer Association, and signing off from Kate from the start, that is Property Checklist. Thanks, everyone.